So welcome back. We left off in After Effects. We've just imported our artwork and now we're going to start a very simple rigging process where we create relationships between various parts of our artwork, different layers, so that they can work together in the animation process. Firstly, we're going to look at creating or adjusting anchor points. Now I'm going to select the Cool Cat's left arm, our left, and have a look at the anchor, where the anchor point there is there. If I twirl down and find our rotation property, you can see that that isn't really a good point to anchor our arm from. I'll just return that back to 0. It would be better to have an anchor point where the cat's shoulder is. So kind of had a more realistic kind of hinge. And I'm going to do that. You will notice there is an anchor point coordinate here, but I think it's easier to use this pan behind or anchor point tool, where we can select that and we can actually drag the anchor point to a different part of the layer. And then when I do that, you can see that that is a more logical place to hinge the arm, and now our cat is waving at us, which is kind of cute. So we'll need to do that for every single layer, and I'll just twirl those properties back and start from the top and use my anchor tool to reposition all of the anchor points. The whiskers might be better off with an anchor point closer to the nose. The eyes, I think the eye blink and the eyes will be fine as is. The head, which is the body as well, I think I'm going to bring that down to the kind of waistline. The ears aren't too bad, but they probably could be a little tighter. And just while I think about it, I want to talk about how Gus has drawn this, and included with the kind of arms, limbs, ears and so on, a little bit of kind of bleed or extra pixels that run behind the cat's body. I think that's quite smart and something to take note of when you're making your own graphics. See how the arms kind of sit behind the body, and that allows us to kind of have a bit of freedom when we're moving things around. The left arm I already did. The right arm, I'm going to move that to the shoulder, and then it's really just the two legs, and we'll move that up to kind of that point there. And I think we're actually done for that. All of our anchor points have been adjusted, which is a great start. Just remember to go back to the move tool before you move on from this part of the process, or else you might get into a bit of a pickle. Next thing we're going to do is do some parenting, because everything at the moment is on its own, but we want to relate particularly our limbs to the body of our artwork. So currently, if I move the body around, everything else stays a bit, stays on its own, is a bit stubborn. But what we want to do is connect those elements to the body and have the body be a controller. Or you can have other things as a controller, but just for this very simple test run, we're going to use the body as the controller. So what we're going to need to do is parent body parts to that head layer. And we do that with through a column here, which is called the parent and link column. Now I've got all sorts of things open here. I probably should have cleaned this up a little bit. There's a couple of icons over here that are shortcuts to opening and closing various elements. Okay, now some of those, like those, we just definitely don't need on. These are obviously, can be extremely useful for when we're looking at our properties, so we'll keep that one on. The one that we want for parenting though is this parent and link column, and we can if you don't find your parent and link column there, we can right click on that bar there and we can select which columns we want in our timeline. Just make sure parent and link is ticked there. And then with that column, we can assign a parent relationship from layers, child layers, to the parent layer. So for example, I'm going to take the hat as our example, and I'm going to come to the pull down in the parent link, and I'm going to choose head as the parent for that layer. And when I do that, and I move the head, now the hat is going to move in relation to that head, which is helpful when we're making, when we're doing all sorts of animation, but particularly for this kind of character stuff. So I'm going to parent pretty much everything to the head here. The whiskers, I'm going to select both of them, and when I select one of the pull downs and select head, it will apply both of those layers as children to the head there. Another thing, I'm going to select both of the eyes. Another way of creating that relationship is to use this thing here called the pickwick, and we'll come across it again and again, but in this instance we can simply use the pickwick to visually create a relationship between one layer and another, these two layers in this instance, and this other layer, to create that parent-child relationship. So you can either use the pull down or the pickwick, doesn't really matter. So the ear, the left ear, the right ear, the arms and the legs, I'm going to all parent to the head, and I'll do it with the pickwick and make it easy. Alright, so now when I pick up the head, or maybe we'll have a look at some of the head properties. So if I rotate it, the cat's everything's gonna move. Scale it, everything's gonna scale. And if I move the position, everything's also gonna scale. So I've kind of got, the head is a controller element for all of the children that kind of are connected to it. So there I would say our rigging is complete, and the next stage we're going to do some animation and work with some keyframes. So I'll catch you shortly.